Hello, welcome to the channel and welcome back if you're a return viewer. You're watching the Crash Review book, and this is the sixth and final review I'm doing over the evenings this week. All the other ones will be up on the channel at the same time. You'll probably be watching them in reverse order if YouTube lays things out as they usually do. Anyway, the last book I want to talk about is Adam Buxton's book, I Love You, Byee. Now that title probably won't make much sense if you do not know about Adam Buxton's long-running podcast. That's where I discovered him about 10 years ago, maybe a little less. He's been running this podcast since 2015. I think maybe 9 years ago, after the death of David Bowie, I discovered his material when he had what he called, I can't remember what it was, Bowie Sadness or something podcast for a while there. And that led me to uncover the rest of his history. He was a TV presenter, radio presenter, friend to the famous. And about 5 years ago, he put out his first book called Ramble Book. Now, I believe I've got a review of that on this channel. And that was kind of inspired by the massive popularity of his podcast. And he was one of the earlier UK podcast successes. And his podcast is a simple recipe. He basically sits down and talks to a person in the media, entertainment, music, or just to some of his friends. He has some famous friends like Louis Theroux and Joe Cornish. And it's a simple recipe, but he makes it entertaining. He does his own jingles and interstitial bits of the podcast, and he bookends it with basically him walking in the countryside with his dog, Rosie. And at the end of the podcast, he screams down the microphone, I love you, bye. I'm not going to scream it the way he does. And so hence the title here. Now, Ramble Book, his first book, was kind of a broader memoir, which he was dealing with at the time, the death of his father, and he was going through his father's things and what he uncovered there. And then we basically followed him from his childhood through his harrowing experiences at private school, all his friends, and a lot about his father. And it was kind of like an ordinary celebrity type memoir with a lot of entertaining stuff, and apparently he created a very entertaining audiobook version, which he has done with the second book again, and apparently that's the one to get if you want to get the full experience. So anyway, I Love You, Byee is another volume of memoirs. I don't think it kind of comes off as successfully as what I remember Ramble Book. This is more focused on several areas in his life. First of all, between the first book and the second book, his mother passed away, and a strong thread in this book is his mother, her rather tragic death. And it forced him to look back through old photographs and material about her life. And we learn about her life as what they used to call an air hostess. His father was a old school travel writer for a newspaper, and he met her. She was originally from Chile, I believe. So she was a little bit exotic, and they got married, and of course had Adam and his siblings. He speculates on what his mother's life was like, and was she sad, was she happy, while uncovering artifacts from her life that he's sorting out after she passed away. And the other main thread in this book is his co-hosting with Joe Cornish, who went on to become a famous film director. In the early days of the UK Channel 4, they presented a show called The Adam and Joe Show, and we learn all about the backstory and the trials and tribulations of making this show and how they managed to pull it off, something that people still are nostalgic for. They pulled it off on the smell of an oily rag, as I say, on hardly any resources, and they did a lot of the work themselves. And they managed to get that renewed several times, and then they went on to other programs and ended up as a popular radio host on BBC Radio 6. And then they parted ways. Cornish became successful when he directed the movie Attack the Block. So Buxton had to make his own way, and that's how he eventually ended up with the podcast. And basically the background to all this is detailed in this book with lots of photos and descriptions. The third strand of this book is basically Buxton's kind of rubbing shoulders with fame and fortune with his association with bands like Travis and Radiohead, how he ended up making videos for them and all sorts of things like that. So a bit of name droppy stuff, but he seems to move in those circles and he's friends with those people, so good on him. That's perhaps the least interesting part of this book. And there are other little things thrown in, like his dabbling in the music industry himself, putting out an album very soon if it hasn't already come out. And there are a few little odds and sods, but overall it seems to be a little bit more focused on the things I just mentioned, and it's not quite as... I found, if I remember Ramble Book being a chuckle-worthy fun read, this is more kind of reflective, sober maybe in the 5 years he's aged a lot after losing his parents and his children growing up. It's still fun to read and entertaining, but I think it's as it's more focused on things directly in his experience, I think if you don't know him, if you don't follow his podcast, you probably won't pick this up and get a massively fun experience. I would tell someone to start with Ramble Book, perhaps. I enjoyed it, but it's, like I said, it's very niche, perhaps. Some people might not like to read about all the hobnobbing with the rich and famous and show business, but there's a heartfelt side to it about his mother and his experiences of basically growing up and becoming a better person. So that is I Love You, Byee by Adam Buxton. Enjoyable, but perhaps read the first book first, and read this as kind of like a addendum onto that one. It's not earth-shattering, it's fun, it's a light read, and you learn a bit of history to Adam Buxton's life if you have any interest in that. So that is pretty much it. That was the last review I'm doing this week, thank goodness. 3 nights a week I've done this after work. And I think that is quite enough. We'll be back next, possibly this weekend, with the July book haul. It's not going to be a massive one. I haven't bought that many in this month so far. Few choice items though. So we'll see you then, and until then, have a good evening, a good morning, or a good night. Bye.